Today, we're going to be talking about a move that all wide receivers need to learn, and that is a slide release. So we're not just going to talk about how you guys can use a slide release. We're going to talk about how you can use the slide release into many different variations, and you have to run a fade route, outside breaking routes like an out route, a corner, a slant. We're going to talk about all the different ways you can use this release to your benefit. This is why I think all wide receivers need to know this. So we're going to show the first example of a slide, and then we'll get into how you can build off of it. So a slide release is something that you would use when you have inside shade press. You have to run a slant, and maybe it's a longer developing slant. So what do I mean by longer developing slant? Because this is more of a patient release, right? And we're going to talk about when you want to use this release. Give me 1 second here. So a patient slant or a later developing slant would be like maybe an RPO, for example, right? So I got my quarterback here. I got my running back here. They're doing a zone read action. They're reading this linebacker. Let's say the linebacker crashed inside, so we have a slant coming back over the top. But I can't get to that window too fast because I have to time up with this mesh point for my quarterback and running back. So I could be a little bit slower with the release that I choose, right? Now, that's where the slide release comes into play. So the slide release is where you slide to the outside, attacking a DB's outside shoulder and outside hip. When we have a DB who's lined up inside shade, or he's a little bit inside shade, or you could tell based off of his stance, you guys. Anytime that you see a wide receiver or a DB and his stance, like the middle of his stance is even with our front foot, we know he's shaded to the inside a little bit. He may not be like way inside, but he is shaded to the inside. His goal is to stop the inside route, which is kind of a problem because I have to run a slant, and it'd be the same thing on a 5-yard in, a post, a dig. He wants to stop those routes and force everything to the outside where his help is, and that's the sideline. So if I have to run a slant, I can't really attack him inside and take the outside release and stack him. I don't have time. I'm running a slant, guys. It's usually a 3-step breaking route. So what I got to do is I got to threaten his outside shoulder and outside hip. So normally what I'd have wide receivers do is something called the diamond release, where you take 3 hard steps at his outside shoulder and hip, try to get him to open up to a fade, and you'd slip underneath. That's a faster pace release, and that absolutely works. But now remember, think about the situation. It's a slower paced slant. So what we do is this slide release. So the first step of this slide could be either with this front foot or with this back foot. And we're going to talk about different variations of this in a second. I call this a prep step. It's essentially a jab step, but the goal, you punch the ground. That's the first step of your release, and you are pushing off of this foot and shuffling, sliding to the outside, threatening this DB's outside shoulder and outside hip. Now, this slide release, you add a crossover move to it. So he goes here, he punch steps. I call these next 2 steps gather steps. So you slide you punch with the left, then you hit him with a left, right? So it's like take 3 gather steps, right, hit him with a crossover, left, right. And if you don't want to think about the gather steps, you don't have to. That's just what I would call those. So now we slide to the outside and we change tempo because we're trying to make it look like maybe we're sliding to the outside, giving a hard fake inside and running a fade. So we hit him with a crossover move. So we step in the direction we're going first. It's a short, quick step. We push off of that step to sell to the outside. We are pushing off of it so my hip, my head can go with my knee, and this step can go outside of his frame, and that's what can get that DB to jump because we threatened outside shoulder and outside hip. Because even if he's inside shade, you guys, he still doesn't want to get beat on the fade. It's still man-to-man coverage. So that's what gets us open on the slant. So guys, that's the basic variation of the slide. So now how can we use that? Because guys, as a receiver, trust me, you don't want 20 different releases that you can use. You want 5 to 6 releases that you're perfect at, and you know how to pair them together. And that's what we're going to give you throughout this video that build off of this slide release right here. So he slides to the outside, hits a crossover, and then wins on that slant. So now this next example is going to be from Keenan Allen, and it's going to be how you guys can build off of that slide release. Now, before we get into this, you guys, if you're a wide receiver and you would like to train with us this off season, we're coming out to 8 more cities across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. Next up on our camp tour, you guys, we're going to be coming out to Chicago, Illinois. Then we'll be heading out to Buffalo, Atlanta, Houston, Philly, Detroit, Boise, and Los Angeles. So guys, a bunch of our camps already sold out. So these first 7 camps that we have were completely sold out, and the rest of these camps, guys, will sell out probably within the next 2 weeks. So guys, check out that very first link in the description below if you're local to one of these cities or would like to be added to our wait list or would like to sign up. So again, guys, very first link in that description below. We'd love to have you out to one of our off-season training camps. Let's get back to this video. So now, let's say, for example, this DB has seen that slide release before. And DBs are taught, honestly, you guys, anytime they see a receiver slide to the outside, hesitate to the outside, they're taught sit inside, expect the slant. That's why they're going out there in the first place. So as a receiver, I can use that to my advantage. And that's what Keenan Allen does right here on this 10-yard out route. So he comes off the ball. Now, instead of doing that prep step with the front foot. He does something called a kick step. So a kick step is another way to create explosion to get into this slide. Like that first example, he took that step with his front foot. He took a quick jab and he pushed off of it to slide outside. You could also take this back foot and kick it behind your front foot. It's a quick kick step to give you that like springboard to the outside. So let's play at full speed. So he comes off, hesitates, and just takes off, right? Guys, this is a great way to pair the two releases together. Because remember, when normally a DB who's inside shade, if you just take off and go run, what's he going to do? He's going to get hands on us. He's going to squeeze us to the sideline. But we change up that tempo a little bit, right? You see how he does that kick step, hesitates a little bit. That DB's thinking, oh, he's trying to cut back inside. I'm going to hold my leverage inside, but that gives me an advantage as a receiver. Because when we change up the tempo off the ball, this DB will also slow down his tempo. He's not going to backpedal fast if we're not going fast. So we change up his tempo. So we go off the ball, we go 0-100, burst up. And that's an easy way to keep that DB on that inside. That's an easy way to just get off the ball quick. And then I get up into my out route. And then now I got plenty of space to the sideline for the QB to throw me open. Could I do this on a corner route? Absolutely. Could I do this on a fade route? Absolutely. Could you do this on an inside breaking route? Absolutely. DB's inside shade. We hesitate, we go, and now we're working to stack him. Or if he's right at my hip, I could slip under and break. So I call this a slide and go release. So you slide to the outside and then go. You could consider this a hesitation skip and go release if you want, if that's easier for you to understand. But I like to think of it as a slide. So he slides off the ball, bursts upfield, breaks this thing right off. So now, what's another way you can use this slide release, okay? So pay attention to the back foot. Look at this kick step. So this is a slide diamond release. So I like this on maybe like a backside 5-yard in, maybe a backside slant or a later developing slant, right? So what this receiver does is he pairs the slide release and remember that diamond release that we talked about. In the very, very beginning of this, I have a DB who's lined up inside shade and I have a first read slant, which is a 3-step slant. It's a quick slant, right? What we want to do is we want to attack his outside shoulder and outside hip for 3 steps. That's the diamond release. So he pairs that with this slide release. So he comes off the ball, slides, 1, 2, 3, and attacks that outside shoulder and hip and is able to win on the slant. Now that 1, 2, 3's got to be fast, guys, because we can't waste time on this. But remember, it starts the same exact way. We slide. This is like, remember, think about that hesitation, skip, and go that Keenan Allen ran on that out route. So what does this look a lot like? He hesitates off the ball, and then he accelerates to the outside. This DB's thinking, oh, I've seen this before. I stayed patient. I did my job sitting to the inside. He bursts up to the outside. Okay, now I got him. I played this thing well. I'm expecting him to run this outside route, and so I attack him hard for 3 steps. So I slide, 1, 2, 3, right at that outside shoulder and hip. DB jumps. Then all of a sudden, I got him again on that slant. So you could run that slant with that slide crossover, or you could go slide diamond release to get that DB to bite. So I'm going to play that again full speed one more time from KJ Hill. It's a perfect example of how you guys can use that slide again on a more creative release. So now let's say, for example, I got to run a fade route, right? Or sometimes I honestly only like this release on a fade route because it takes a little while. But this would be great if you guys use that slide release like in that very first example on the goal line, right? So we have inside shade. This receiver's running a fade route. So when I'm running this fade route, my goal would be to attack his leverage, get him to hold inside so I have more space to the outside. Now on the goal line, it's probably not a good idea for me to just slide and go because that can sometimes cut down the field space. So what he does, watch what he does and watch what his first step does. He takes that prep step. So he preps up slide, 1, 2, an inside crossover to hold that DB and attack his leverage. So guys, that's a 4th way. Break down 4 ways to do this slide release in less than 10 minutes, guys. So he comes off the ball. He gives that jab step inside to do what? It's a prep step. He's pushing off of that prep step, slides to the outside. What does this look a lot like? Looks like that slide release slant. Looks like, again, he's trying to cut back to the inside. DBs are taught, hold it to the inside. So let's make it look that way. We're pairing our releases together. He jabs, he slides, so he makes it look like he's just going to cut and run that slant, throws the inside fake, holds that DB's leverage, and then you see all of this space to the outside, and we got separation. So guys, that's 4 ways right there that you could break down that slide release. This is a slide and an inside crossover to run that goal line fade or just a fade ball.